A U.S. jury just ruled that concert giant Live Nation and its subsidiary Ticketmaster had a harmful monopoly over big concert venues. This week, let's look at that case and try and figure out why we overpay for live entertainment. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 20, Chapter 7, Live Nation, Ticketmaster.
Before we get to the hows, the whys, and the dollar amounts, a little history. Ticketmaster was founded in 1976, merged with Live Nation in 2010. According to the Associated Press, Live Nation Entertainment owns, operates, controls booking for, or has an equity interest in hundreds of venues across North America. Ticketmaster is considered to be the world's largest ticket seller for live events. The merged conglomerate controls 86% of the live concert market. 86%. And 73% of the overall market when sports events are included. First, Live Nation, originating in 1996 as SFX Entertainment by entrepreneur Robert F.X. Sillerman. 1996, Sillerman began buying up regional concert promoters across the country with the idea of forming a national entity that would control the live venue market. The goal was to create a one-stop shop for artists while controlling promotion, venue management, and talent booking. This should have immediately been on someone's radar. Lawmakers, at the least, i.e. antitrust and monopoly concerns. In 2000, Clear Channel Communications bought out SFX Entertainment for $4.4 billion, calling it Clear Channel Entertainment. A few years later, they spun it off into a separate entertainment company, rebranding it Live Nation. And again, they merged with Ticketmaster in 2010. And this entire time, as they took a stranglehold on the industry, no one said anything. Well, almost no one. Remember in 1994, Pearl Jam filed an antitrust complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice, alleging that Ticketmaster held a monopoly that influenced ticket prices and controlled venues, which of course is all true. Pearl Jam testified before Congress. They even did a brief 3-song set. Okay, not that last part. But ultimately, the Justice Department refused to bring forward a case. It would have helped, too, if other artists had joined the initiative. But no one else did. In my opinion, when SFX Entertainment began buying up all these other concert promoters to control tickets and venues, they must have been taking a lesson from legendary Canadian promoter CPI, Concert Productions International. Remember them? CPI. Founded by Michael Cole, a man they called the Howard Hughes of rock promoters, and Bill Ballard, son of the then Maple Leafs owner, the notorious Harold Ballard. CPI was founded in the early 70s, but by the 1980s had almost complete control of all major concerts in Canada, Toronto, and West. A quick side note, Montreal and East was usually handled by a promoter out of Montreal named Donald K. Donald. His real name was Donald K. Tarleton. He just passed away a few weeks ago, April 13th, at age 82. He was a long-time and beloved, respected concert booker and agent, a man his wife called Dean of the University of Show Business. But back to CPI. By 1989, Cole made an historic deal with the Rolling Stones, a deal that revolutionized the entire touring industry. 1989 Steel Wheels Tour. By the way, pundits dubbed it the Steel Wheelchair Tour because it was 1989, and the Stones were already so old, much too old to tour 37 years ago.
They once sang, "Time is on my side," and for the Rolling Stones, it appears it is. Even though he's about to turn 46 years old, Mick Jagger showed he's still ready to strut his stuff as he and the band announced a 29-city reunion tour of North America. They say this will not be their last.
Here's what happened. Never been done before. CPI guaranteed the band $70 million for 50 tour dates. Now, in the day, touring was a relatively low revenue source for a band. The guaranteed $70 million, which would be about $200 million in today's money, that was just pure profit for the musicians, but it left Cole and CPI to manage all other aspects of the tour. The dates, the venues, the sponsorships, the merchandising, pay-per-view, all for a healthy percentage. Basically, Stones, here's a pile of money. You just play your songs, and you just let us try and make money from this on the side. Though CPI worked with the Stones for many years, including the 94-95 Voodoo Lounge tour, later Keith Richards described this as a deal with the devil. Plus, mid-90s, and the Eagles said, hey, if the Stones can do it, so can we. Those ticket prices surged for the Hell Freezes Over tour. CPI Stones, though, that deal did set the precedent for high-priced, high-grossing stadium tours. If you're wondering why we overpay for concerts to this day, look back to that deal. That's a huge factor. I mean, I guess somebody would have done that eventually, but it was Toronto's CPI. In the U.S., Sillerman had to be watching this, going, yeah, that's how you do it. You control everything. And he began to build what would one day be Live Nation. CPI eventually was absorbed by them, taken over by that early U.S. company. And Michael Cole served briefly as their chairman of the board of directors. And by the way, higher live event ticket prices aren't just inflation. Here's the math. Before the historic Stones CPI Satanic Pact, in 1984, you could get a ticket to a Stones show for about $20. In today's money, that would be about $70. $70. Yet the average price of a ticket today to a large stadium show, $216. 3 times the inflation rate. Ticketmaster, of course, is the other villain in this story. Again, now a subsidiary of Live Nation. Each on their own would be problems enough. But together, it's as if the Green Goblin and Dr. Doom morphed to become one evil entity. Ticketmaster was founded in 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona, but not to be a ticket seller. Rather, they wanted to develop and sell computerized hardware to local venues and let them sell the tickets. Apparently, one of Ticketmaster's founders saw a brochure for Ticketron. Remember them? Ticketron, the dominant computerized ticket seller of the day. And he thought, boy, we could build a better system. Here's some trivia. Their first client was the booking company for the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And their first show was an ELO concert at the University of New Mexico's gym in 1977. Gee, I wonder if Jesse Pinkman went to that show. They did face some early funding issues, and one of their first big investors was the owner of Hyatt Hotels. He owned Ticketmaster for a brief time. After moving the company to Los Angeles to be closer to the entertainment industry, they changed their business model. Rather than charging venues a fee to use their computing system, because that's what Ticketron did, Ticketmaster offered to pay the venues and to share the service fee revenues. In exchange, Ticketmaster would be given exclusive rights to sell tickets for that venue. Everybody wins, except the consumer. Soon they had exclusive rights to most major venues. And they also bought out Ticketron. Merrily, they rolled along over concert goers gouging all the way for the next 2 decades until they went in with Live Nation. That merger did receive criticism from artists, consumer groups, some legal experts, but the U.S. Department of Justice eventually let it through. Now we have this latest case decided only weeks ago, when the jury ruled against Live Nation Ticketmaster. During the proceedings, a Live Nation executive, Benjamin Baker, admitted to internal emails in which he said prices were outrageous, and he called the customers so stupid for paying them, and said that they, Live Nation, was robbing them blind. He apologetically testified that these messages were immature and unacceptable. But he did say those things and they were bang on. I don't think he admitted to that. The case is also unique because it was a civil suit, but yet it was led by the U.S. government, with 33 states coming on board as complainants. Interestingly, the jury found in this latest case that Live Nation Ticketmaster overcharged in those 33 states for the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, an average of $1.72 per ticket, $1.72. But that's times the number of shows, number of patrons, 33 states. That's hundreds of millions of dollars for Live Nation Ticketmaster to repay, not to mention any possible fines, penalties, and other compensations. Live Nation Ticketmaster planned an appeal, saying, they're not a monopoly, which is ridiculous. Of course they are. Here's the legal definition of monopoly. A monopoly constitutes a market structure where a single seller or producer dominates the entire industry, offering a unique product or service with no close substitutes. Key features include high barriers to entry, preventing competition, significant market power, and the ability to act as a price maker by controlling supply. Monopoly? Thy name is Live Nation Ticketmaster. Stop trying to put one by us. You're a monopoly. And you're like big tobacco and alcohol and sugar and pharma and social media, all of them saying, hey, we're not the problem. Well, yes, you are. The judge in this latest case is about to set another trial, this one on how to solve the problem. And one of the things the state attorneys general want is divestiture, i.e., spin off Ticketmaster as a separate company, which it was until 2010. When the U.S. Department of Justice was warned about the dangers here, but approved the merger anyway. And don't be fooled by that jury thing of $1.72 per ticket. That's not the root of the issue. When Ticketmaster computerized the system, and then Ticketmaster improved on it, and then we all got connectable high-speed computers in the palm of our hands, that changed everything. Before all of this, we did have scammers. We called them ticket scalpers, the politically incorrect term for people who, through ways of their own, bought many tickets to any one event and then sold them at inflated prices to anyone who could not get a ticket by conventional means. I think you can still find some of these guys hanging around the arenas and the stadiums and the theaters. Who needs tickets? Who needs tickets? A friend of a friend recently told me a great story that when he was a kid, he lived a short bike ride away from Exhibition Stadium. And on Blue Jays game day, he and a bunch of the kids would pedal over to the stadium where the cops would bust these scalpers, confiscate their tickets, and then hand them out free to the kids. Those were the days, huh? When it was that simple? This is all high-level, high-tech now. We call them ticket resellers, StubHub, TickPick, and a host of others. Even Ticketmaster has its own ticket reseller online. That's why people went online to try and buy an Eras tour ticket, only to find them sold out only seconds after they went on sale. Because you're not just competing with other Swifties, you're competing with all those super speed, high-end corporate softwares who are also buying up hundreds of tickets. Many jurisdictions have made it illegal for bots to buy up event tickets, but it's a gray area. What is a bot? What if it's a person who's just launching a software? If it is, it's just the same effect as a bot. This really came to light again last year in Ontario, when after 30 years, there were Blue Jays World Series tickets for sale. Open market, decent seats were going for over $10,000 in some cases. There was also that Taylor Swift tour. In Canada and the U.S., many people said it was actually cheaper for mom and daughter to fly to Europe, stay in a hotel, and buy tickets in, Paris or Vienna than to see the Taylor Swift show in their own city. That is so wildly crazy, but true. Ontario, among others, did have a Ticket Sales Act to protect consumers, but Doug Ford, in his wisdom, repealed it in 2019. I know, I just used Doug Ford and wisdom in the same sentence. And after the Blue Jays World Series last year, Ford saw a kiss-ass opportunity. So he recommended introducing a law that would cap prices on the resale of tickets, capping them at face value or maybe just a tiny percentage over. Good luck with that. You're just putting up a speed limit sign and watching how many people obey. Sure, every once in a while you pull someone over, but it does nothing to solve the issue. There's also some rules on how many tickets Ticketmaster can move over to their own resale site. Because people have this experience of finding an event totally sold out on Ticketmaster in a few seconds, yet a number of tickets were instantly available on the resale site. Now again, some of those might have been moved over by the purchasers themselves, but there are some rules on that now. Again, doesn't really help much. And it does nothing to cover the others like StubHub, all very difficult to monitor and police. These are nothing more than online scalpers, again, pardon the term. You can't just go in there, grab all their tickets, and hand them out to kids on bikes. The other major factor in this overpayment is, of course, the market dictates. What is anything worth? It's worth what someone is willing to pay for it. $180 million for an original Picasso, $75 million for a vintage Ferrari, $11,000 for a Coldplay ticket. Then that's what it's worth. Market decides. What is not fair, and what we're partly talking about here, is somebody trying to artificially inflate that market. Yeah, Live Nation, Ticketmaster, looking at you. They even tried to scam us with this euphemism, dynamic pricing, also known as surge pricing. I did a podcast on this back a while ago, episode 148. In other words, it's worth what it's worth until you really need it. Uber was the great example. Downtown to my house, $30. Unless it's New Year's Eve, then it's not 35 or even 50, it's $200 now. Dynamic is hardly the first word I thought of, but that's ticket sales. They invented surge pricing before it was even called that. Add to it that today as a musician, you have to tour. It used to be the touring just helped sell the records. That's where the money was. But not anymore. Artists, with a few exceptions, don't really get rich from Spotify or, appearing on any digital playlist. The opposite has happened. It's the online exposure that helps sell out the venues where you make some money. And there's only a handful of acts, a dozen or so, that can tour the big venues. And, as I've just spent the last few minutes saying, look who controls those. They control all the medium venues as well. But you're an artist trying to make a living, maybe even a good living. You got to tour. And the tours end up being a ripoff for the consumer because of the big corporate entities like Live Nation and Ticketmaster. Even if the artist said, I'll take a pay cut, I get final say on maximum ticket prices. Well, they just don't have control of that, the venues, the touring, the setup, the tear down, any of that. And definitely not over the resale market. The artist is basically powerless in this, almost as much as you and I. Parallel to sports, when the big teams come into town, there's dynamic pricing. They admit to it. Blue Jays tickets are more when the Yankees are in town than, say, Cleveland, no offense. I guess as a music artist, you could also opt for something like a residency, like they have in Vegas, or, Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden. But even then, you got to have a ticket. And that's where all this hyperinflationary mechanism cuts in. Also, the venues themselves have changed. They are bigger, better, fancier, more expensive to operate, and they can also dictate what are the gold seats and what are the special areas where they can charge you even more. Many of them now have suites with added amenities. Those inflate the ticket price even further. So why, since the 80s, have live event ticket prices gone up 1,000%? Truly, it's 1,000%. 1,000%. Again, general inflation from the 80s to today can't account for 1,000% increase. If it did, we'd think nothing of paying $1 million for a new Toyota Camry or $1,200 a pound for ground beef. We don't do that. That would be unacceptable. But 1,000% increase for a concert ticket? Somehow that's fine. We pay that? Of course, it's not acceptable. And every so often, we make some noise. And then nothing seems to change. We can look back at these factors. That CPI Stones deal, It set the precedent. The Eagles' surge pricing in 1994 hell freezes over tour that's often recognized as a turning point in exorbitant ticket costs. Ticketmaster and their gouging, inserting themselves not just as a middleman, but an entire army of them, and they all need to get paid. And then the introduction and improvement of automation and connectivity, allowing dynamic pricing, and the lack of governments to take any legal action to help us. That's why we overpay. And of course, it's cheaper to fly to Europe to see Taylor Swift because the EU has some pretty strict ticket reselling legislation. While in Canada and the US, governments seem to keep their nose as far up the corporate butts as they can. Governments and their agencies find it more advantageous to appear to be doing something to solve a problem than to really be doing something. I'd love to see them actually doing something about this problem. I'd love to see it. I'd buy a ticket.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk, 37, at gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.